All right, folks. Welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery Artist Talk Series today. We're going to hear from Calcagno. I said it wrong. It's Cal. Cullen. And then Cal will share with you the best way to say her name because it's amazing. Cal's going to talk about her work and where that work stems from and all sorts of good things that you're going to be treated with. This is for the exhibition Build It, Artists Creating Community in Ohio, which was curated by Erica Hess. A little bit of housekeeping while we're here. I want you all to know that you are more than welcome to ask questions in the comments or in the Q&A area. So whether you're on Zoom or you're on Facebook, feel free to share those questions and we will get to them at the end of the conversation. Cal's going to talk for about 45, 50 minutes. And I think that's it on the housekeeping. If you need closed captioned at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should have the option to be able to turn your closed caption on. And again, if you have any questions for us, feel free to chat with us and we will get those answers to you. Without further ado, Cal.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Kat and Amy and everyone at the Rife. So yeah, my name is Cal Cullen. Calcagno is the full name, but Cal is fine. And I'm going to talk about my own art practice and really how it intersects with my job as an arts administrator, a community member, a mom, a neighbor. All of these things kind of overlap for me. And so I wanted to start out with one of my daily drawings. I've been doing, I have a process, I would say, over the past 10 years, 15 years even, where I always have some kind of a daily art ritual. The past year and a half, it's looked something like this. It's been a daily drawing, but I'll talk through a few more of these daily processes. And I think it's something about having this like go-to, repetitive, easy, tangible thing that I can lay my hands on each day and feel like pure ownership and authorship of. Whereas, as you'll see, most of my projects are truly collaborative and very hard to call my own. Even they're very much collaborative with communities or other artists, and I love it that way. But sometimes I need to come home and just feel like something is mine. So we'll revisit that. I want to start with a place. So most of the work that I do is very place-based. It's very much centered on building a community or a project that's geography based. So my home and where I work and where I play and live is in Camp Washington, a neighborhood in Cincinnati. It's a neighborhood that's been disinvested in for several decades, but also has a very eclectic mix of people and buildings and is really inspiring to me and has pretty much acted as my muse for the past 7 years. It is also where the organization that I run is. This is Wave Pool. Both of the buildings, Wave Pool runs the Welcome Project, which is next door, and then its main spaces in the firehouse. And that's also where I live. And my own art practice, it's very hard to define where my job as an arts administrator, curator, community organizer ends, and my job or my art practice begins. I feel like they've become enmeshed in such a way that that is really unique, and I think about certain artists like Charles Gregorian, who has this, he bases his art practice on pedagogy. He's an educator. And there's really no line between his job as a teacher and his job as an artist. And for me, it's very similar in that there really is no line between my job as an arts administrator and my role as an artist. So it's really impossible for me to talk about my own art practice without talking about the things that I do for the larger arts community and the larger community of Camp Washington and beyond. So I'm going to backtrack a bit and kind of go into the evolution of how this all happened. And I think it's kind of a unique story in how this practice came to be. In 2007, I graduated from UC with my MFA and felt like I wanted to somehow escape the Midwest and reach the art world of New York, right? Like there's New York, I guess, stands for this. It's a symbol for the worldwide art market, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I started writing letters to random people that I found in the white pages almost every day that often ended in a question mark, like the one on the left. Sometimes they didn't, but they always included a self-addressed stamped envelope and invited people to respond to me. As I said, random people from the white pages selected on a whim, just mailing them out and hoping for a response. Over the period of 10 years, I mailed over 1,000 letters and got about 50 in return. And this process, this repetitive process of writing these letters and trying to communicate with the New York City, even in this kind of silly way, I really, looking back on it, created an archive of my life. It acted just as much as like a personal diary as it did as a way of connecting with others. In August 2009, I did leave Cincinnati with my husband and oftentimes collaborator, Skip Cullen. And we decided we're going to move, we're going to go to where the art world is, and debated for a while between New York, LA. We ended up deciding on San Francisco for a few reasons. But decided we didn't want to just move. We wanted to take others with us. We wanted to uplift the Cincinnati and the Midwest art world as we were making this trek. And so we spent a month. We built out this little trailer on the left with a green map of the U.S. on it. We had these walls that we fabricated, and we had an open call for artworks to be submitted from Midwestern artists. And I forget how many artists, 13, 15 maybe. And we traveled around the country for a month displaying this pop-up exhibition. And whenever possible, we would partner with another gallery or a museum, preferably with an event like the one on the left is at Final Friday in Cincinnati, so that we could get exposure to all of these Midwest artists and kind of prove in our trek to San Francisco that we had a thriving art scene in Cincinnati. And also these artists were able to mark on their resume that they had exhibitions in all of these cities. And it also created a lot of network for us, for Skip and I, that we still are in touch with some of the galleries that we partnered with on this traveling exhibition. So I think this is a good example of pretty early on, 2009, finding ways to bridge our art practice with this arts administration, this curating, this community organizing approach. When I arrived in the Bay Area, I didn't know anybody and felt like I'm a very social person. Part of my art practice is always about reaching out and connecting with others. So I put a call out in Craigslist and in local newspapers around Oakland. That's where I was living at the time, to meet people and to have them come to my studio, which was at Cala Arts Center, and be photographed and interviewed. And the interviews, it was like 20 some questions, pretty personal questions. What are your goals for your life? Where, what is your childhood like? What's your favorite memory from when you were 12? And I got to know these people on a pretty intimate level fairly quickly and created these portraits, these large scale portraits. The telephones on them, which actually some are behind me now, they held the audio from the interviews. So for the resulting exhibition I had, which a portion of it's on the right, viewers in the gallery picked up the headset on the portraits and could listen to these subjects talking about their life. So it became more than just a photo portrait, but a way to get to know people and connect with them in this pretty analog way. And that this interest in analog technology, ever since that project and even before, has been a constant in my work. I started doing a lot of telephone-based projects throughout the city. The project on the left, I put outside of my apartment in San Francisco as a way to get to know my neighbors. And this was, I lived right across from the projects, and it's like an old payphone booth that the phone was gone from because they started ripping them out. So it had a sound activated recorder in it. So when somebody picked it up and started speaking, it would record whatever they said. And some of the responses I got were like kids goofing off, but some of them were really honest and genuine and open, which surprised and delighted me. So again, it's like creating this archive and trying to reach out in poetic ways to connect with others. So in San Francisco, I was really lucky enough to land my dream job, at least it was my dream job at the time, in the education department at SF MoMA. So working in this pristine white box world-class museum with these blue chip artists, world-renowned. And 6 months later, after I got the job, it closed. And they decided to, well, they got funding to do a huge expansion. The new museum is amazing if you haven't been. So what this did, while at the very beginning, I was like, oh no, like, what are we gonna do? How can we give tours and have classes? It actually it allowed us to think really creatively about how to reach communities in the city of San Francisco and beyond, and kind of set up my career and my artistic practice for this community engagement centric work that I do now. So of course we did a lot of these kind of programs where you're like, the make it, take it programs where you're out in a community making things. But the part that I got to do was working with teachers and schools and grassroots organizations to bring world-renowned artists to those schools and organizations and do meaningful projects. So one of the things that we started doing was we overhauled the curriculum and made it artist-focused, artist-centric instead of curriculum-centric. We figure teachers know what they're doing. They don't need us to show them how to meet their standards. But what they don't have is access to artists. And seeing art practice as curriculum was really empowering. And I was able to connect with a lot of really amazing artists to develop these activities, these prompts. there was an exhibition in the city of Los Altos, just south of San Francisco, where I organized a program that put prompts from artists inside of the Los Altos weekly newspaper. And this was a way to connect with the people in the city of Los Altos and also elevate artists' instructions in a really community-based way. So you can see, like, on the right is my dog and Skip. I have to point that out. But we started getting responses back from community members to the prompts. They would be sent into Los Altos daily newspaper or mailed to SF MoMA or sent to our email. And again, creating this archive of artists asking communities to participate, and then it becomes a collaborative project. At the same time that I was at SF MoMA, I was working at Adobe Books as a volunteer. The bookstore was closing down, being gentrified out of the Mission District. This bookstore has a real heart in community. It's run as a co-op now, and my husband and I were part of the core 12 group that transitioned it into a co-op, and it has a long history with the artists of San Francisco, specifically the Mission School artists, Barry McGee, Chris Johansson, Margaret Kilgallen, et cetera. And I was invited to be the director of their backroom gallery, and this was really my first experience in getting to run a community-based space and organize programming that is purely community focused, as well as organizing exhibitions. So between these two experiences, the experience at SF MoMA with these world-renowned artists and trying to reach out into communities, and then the experience of working at this kind of ragtag bookstore and saving it from being gentrified out of the city. I wanted to combine those two worlds. I wanted to combine the community-centric grassroots organizing with the art world, the power of a well-known artist, the power of the museum and education work. So that's how Wave Pool was born, was really thinking about like how those two worlds could meet each other. And so this is the first exhibition we had featured the work of Susan O'Malley, and this was on the side of the building. And this is what we do. We think about what communities needs and then pair them with artist ideas and artist projects. So we do a lot of artist programming and a lot of neighborhood programming, and it's really is like a spectrum. So I want to talk a bit about, I'm not going to talk too much about Wave Pool because that's its own talk, even though it does overlap, but I'm going to talk a bit about deep listening because that's something that we hold as a value here at Wave Pool, but it's also something that bleeds into every one of my projects. And really, it's about getting to know a community well before attempting to do any kind of project with them. Before you can solve an issue, you really need to know the community that it's affecting. So these are a few of the listening projects that we've done at Wave Pool, ways to get to know the community in Camp Washington and other communities. The one on the left was a reproductive health care program we did with Children's Hospital here in Cincinnati. Giving people a lot of like food and incentives to give their ideas and thoughts and become friends is really important. And in my own art practice, as I mentioned, this is something that I do a lot as well. For several years, I was visiting this town called Monasterace in southern Italy. And these are images from that project. Started started spending just like a month there, getting to know the residents. It's one of those really romantic dying towns that the population keeps shrinking, and it's mostly elderly folks. So I wanted to document the people there and also garner the wisdom that they had. So Andrea, who was on the donkey on the right, said, senza le mani non facciamo niente, which means without our hands, we can't do anything. And so I decided to make a book about their hands and documenting the residents of the town. And then we made castings we did a community workshop. I did a community workshop where the hands were cast, and it was on display as part of a public art walk in the town, a festa that they had. And then it got accessioned into their farmers museum. So it's on permanent display in the center of town, which is really nice. And I try and go back there as often as possible. This whole idea of creating an archive as a point of action continues to bleed through my work as well. This is an image from, and also listening, right? Listening as a point to create an archive. This is a image from an exhibition I had at the CAC in 2019. And this piece is up at the Rife, the typewriter piece called Desiderate. This piece, the prompts sometimes change. But for this iteration and the iteration that's up at Rife right now, it says on one side, something that you love about yourself, and on the other side, it's something that we wish we could change about ourselves. So it's got this like positive and negative, but the paper is looped in the middle, so they feed each other. And of course, it's nice to see it really activated by a lot of people pre-COVID. Additionally, in that exhibition, I wanted to find ways to reach outside of the museum, or to both reach outside of the museum as well as to have people who are outside the museum reach in and affect what was happening in the space. So I put up flyers around the city with this phone number, asking people to call into the number and tell us about the last time you met someone new. And what was really nice is that with this, rotary phone and this old voice mail recorder, it would ring in the middle of the gallery, and then people in the gallery would be able to hear the voicemail being recorded like in real time. So again, using this analog technology because it's got a sculptural aspect that I really love, but there's also certain sounds and things that I think resonate. It's got a tactile nature that people find some novelty to, and it just makes you want to participate. Community meals are something that I've been doing more and more of in the past 10 years. I was the artist in residence at the Center for Great Neighborhoods in Covington for a year. And the goal of the artist in residence was to figure out food access in the west side of Covington, and what residents are looking for and where the biggest holes are to fill, as far as like whether it's in grocery stores and things that need to be made available that way, or in certain restaurants that they're looking for. So one of the listening projects I did was a very large scale community dinner where the soup that was served was all made out of rescued foods, right? Like foods that maybe Kroger didn't want because they were bruised or something, but still perfectly good. And then there were 600 seats wrapping around this community park, blocking off 4 streets where people could sit down and used markers to answer these series of prompts that got people thinking about food access in the neighborhood. It was a really beautiful event. And then, so I started with that base, like I'll provide the tablecloths and the prompts. And then all these other community groups started being like, oh, if you're going to do that, like we'll have a raffle, or let's play this game in the middle. So it became much bigger than what I had imagined, which was great. This sort of like food-based art practice, community dinners translated into wave pools practice through a program called Cincinnati's Table, which I continue to help organize and am passionate about, where we feature an artist and an immigrant chef and go to a different community each time to connect members and have conversations. So this piece, the tablecloth, was made by Denise Burge, and people were invited to write answers on the tablecloth, and then the food was cooked by George Abagosh, a Palestinian chef, and it was in Mount Healthy. And I hosted another Cincinnati's Table event. I mean, we've done Cincinnati's Table about 20 or 30 times, but I did it as part of the Archive as Action show at the CAC in 2019 around this table that is up at the Rife right now. This table, called the Communa Table, was created by me basically putting out an open call to my community, to my friends on social media, saying, if you have old furniture, please donate it. And people were dropping things off or leaving them outside the door. And I pieced it together like a puzzle piece, like a network of different found objects to make this very long, 21-foot long table. And the table operates as for like lots of different things, workshops. I used it as my office for a while when the show was up at the CAC, but it also can operate for dinners. So this is one of the dinners that we had around the table. And this piece or this dinner included my work, obviously, as the table and facilitator, but Mary Claire Reitz also devised a game and conversation starter project that happened during the dinner. And then Manzara Reed was the chef. Delicious. So this idea of Archive as Action, which was the title of the show at the CAC a couple years ago, I think sums up my work pretty well. This idea of like reaching into a community and asking for information and then responding to it, and documenting it both for the sake of preservation and propriety, but also for the sake of having a jumping off point for the next person or next community organization to take those findings and do something with. I received a grant a few years ago to do a project in the west side of Covington in Kentucky. And they have a very strong maker culture there, and they were looking to foster the community identity as a space where things are made, where people are very hands-on, whether it's cooking or art or gardening or welding, whatever it is. So I spent probably a year getting to know the community through just word of mouth mostly, and flyers, asking anyone that makes anything to be part of this book and this festival that we put on. So I interviewed each participant and then asked them for a recipe. Some of them are literal recipes, like how to make braised chicken, but some of them are things like this potatoes and tires, how to grow potatoes in found urban tires. And this book is still something that I know the residents treasure and display, and they hand out at the Center for Great Neighborhoods. For the release of this book, I held a festival where we had a map available at this tent, and you could walk around the neighborhood and go into people's studios or homes and get to meet the people that are in the book. And they had like taste testing and demos and things throughout the day. Back to the daily art practice. So I stopped doing my New York City letters, the letters that I was writing to New York, because I got a letter in the mail from an artist named Tommy King, who was at the Lebanon Correctional Center. And he wanted help growing his art practice, growing his skill. And my biggest advice was that he should just draw all the time. And, you know, if that's what he wants to do, he wanted to be a realistic illustrator, then he should use his time doing that. So we decided to work on it together. And for a year, we both made daily drawings of objects that were around us. So I was a new mom at the time. So a lot of my drawings, which are the left half of this image, have my toddler's scribbles on them. She became a collaborator in that way. And then, of course, Tommy was incarcerated, so his images reflect the world around him being in prison. And so we did this for a whole year, and it turned into a book. So there's 730 drawings total, 365 from each of us. Another like part of this wanting to reach outside the museum and wanting the people in the museum to be able to participate in something that's like, you know, outside of the walls of the gallery was this mapping project that we did as part of the Archive is Action CAC exhibition. So I took out and I used my CIC artist stipend to take out a full page ad in City Beat weekly newspaper that looked like the image on the left, and the center where the white is was blank, and it basically asked people to make a map of the important things to them in Cincinnati. So people would draw their houses, their favorite stores, their favorite coffee shop, their grocery, the parks they go to. This one obviously shows different types of gardens around the city. So people kind of took it their own way, but then we took all of the collected maps and had a workshop where we used the results of those maps, as well as people that were coming to the gallery that day or people that knew the event was happening, and really thought about where Cincinnati is now, what's important to the city now, and what could be, doing a future envisioning project. And this was a collaboration with my colleague, Ellen White, who does food mapping and eco civic design. So yeah, another way to create an archive that can have impact beyond just a collection. All of these ways that I was collecting input through this exhibition, I wanted to make them part of the exhibition. So the walls were mounted with these 3 file cabinets. One was for the New York City letters that were sent out. One was for this postcard project that I had going on. And one was for the food, or the This Is Your Place maps. So as the exhibition went on over the 6-month run, these things would get filed and people were invited to look through them. And I think that this idea that like the public can become part of the exhibition is really important to me, and just opening it up to this more democratic process of inclusion and having the exhibition grow with the community is symbolic. The phones that are behind me were also part of the exhibition, simply because I had this archive of community interviews that I did in Oakland that I wanted to show these stories again, and have this audio be part of the show as well. This is a full view of that exhibition or my portion of the exhibition. So the text in the back, it goes back to my drawing practice, which I normally keep kind of close to my chest, right? Like that's my drawing practice that happens on a day-to-day is the thing that's, I would say, not collaborative usually, although with Tommy, I guess it changed. So I wanted to at least acknowledge that drawing practice in this exhibition, but also it's a mind map of how I connect my own artistic practice with my job as an arts administrator, with my role as a mother, with my familial history, with like all of the things that have like gotten me to this point and my own identity. So to me, creating this wall piece in the background of this exhibition was about creating a context for all of my work. And I don't know that that may not translate to an ordinary viewer, but to me, it was really important to create this, this background of this mind map of connections. In 2019, Skip and I were invited to do a collaborative project in the Ukraine, in Ivano-Frankivsk, Ukraine. The US Embassy paid for us to come and do a community engagement project as part of a symposium and festival they were having. And what was really interesting is that we spent about a year preparing. So even though we were only there for a few weeks, the year leading up to it, we worked really closely with this organization in town called Teple Misto. They're actually very similar to Wave Pool in a lot of ways. And they helped us get to know the community. They had been doing their own deep listening of the city and their neighborhood for a long time. And so they were able to feed us information about what the community's needs were, and allowed us to feel comfortable in going into an unknown city, an unknown community, and doing a project that might hold meaning. So from my point of view, it was really great to see the other side of things, because Wave Pool hosts a very similar artist residency where we provide that community context for an artist. So to have the roles reversed was a really great experience. But the project that we ended up doing there was, one of the biggest needs was the community complained about the amount of algae in this pond. It's just like they wanted to clean up the pond and to make it a more beautiful place for them to relax and have fun. So we found out that upon some research that barley acts as an algicide, a natural algicide if you put a bale of barley in water. And also Ukraine has a history of traditional straw weaving. So we thought that was a good starting point, was to do something practical that could help clean out the lake while getting the community involved. So we hosted this event where the neighbors were weaving straw into these wreaths, these like crowns that go around their head, which actually that festival already coordinated with when we were going to be there. And at the same time, we had a translator go around and ask all of the participants what they want for the future of Ivano-Frankivsk. And we made a video, it's like a 30-minute video that displays the results of the project and the weaving process, as well as the audio of all of the participants and what they say with translations. And then when the piece was completed and it became this very large woven barley, like organic form sculpture, we took snippets from each of the interviews and turned it into a poem, read the poem, translator read the poem, and then we launched it into the lake for the neighborhood and had music and things. So it worked out really well. And I think they were really happy with how it turned out. I have not heard how much algae it actually cleared, but it was more about the future envisioning. And now they have all this text, much more than just what's reduced down in this poem, but they have this long, 30-minute video of residents saying what their dreams are for the future of the city. Let's see. So back to Italy, I mentioned that I was working with the senior citizens there a lot. In that town, Monasterace, there is a refugee house at the bottom of the hill that's segregated from the city. And there is little to no contact between the Italians and the refugees. And there's some tension there. So I wanted to find a way to bridge those connections, because there's this, the town is dying. They need younger people to get involved in order to keep it alive. And here's all these people that want so desperately to be part of Europe and to be part of this community. So I started making art with the refugee group there, and I had them do, one of the projects we did, I had them do still life contour drawings of olive branches, being a symbol of peace and unity, and had them write why they wanted to come to Europe. And made I then pieced them together to make a wallpaper. And this wallpaper was sold to benefit the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Fund. The wallpaper has significance because in Monasterace, there's these muratori which repair the walls. It's just like a constantly crumbling town, and this muratori, this refreshing of the walls, is just a constant job. So the idea of refugees creating a wall covering, I think, had a symbolic meaning. And then I had an exhibition in Dayton where the wallpaper was on view, along with portraits of the refugees who contributed. And then I made 1,000 of these little boats out of the wallpaper, and people throughout the exhibition could take the boat and donate whatever they deemed appropriate to the UNHCR. And so they slowly disappeared throughout the exhibition, and we raised some money for the UNHCR. I then worked with refugees in Sardinia, and this is another community dinner project I did. There was a lot of violence happening between the refugee population and the Italians at the time I was there. In fact, one of the refugee women was brutally attacked the week that I was there. And so I wanted to have a coming together and a discussion around how we can make a better world together, unified. So a lot of the city council members, I don't know if that's what they're called in Sardinia, but the city officials came along with the refugee house. It was a potluck. So they all brought a recipe from home that they cooked. And then they talked about what a recipe for a better world looks like, and had some planning. So when I got back from that trip, I was like, why do I have to go to Italy every time I work with refugees? And I reached out to an organization locally here And we started doing weekly art classes that turned into 4-day-a-week program, art and sewing. And that is what started the Welcome Project, which is now Wavepool's biggest community engagement project. There's ceramics classes, there's cooking classes, it's got a food market. It's just really grown into a place where a lot of people can produce and sell work as well as get to know each other. That's Erica, she's the manager of it right now. And there's the kitchen, which quickly turned into a food pantry last year due to COVID. All right, so the last project I want to talk to you about, I think I have enough time. About a year ago, I was selected by Artworks to develop my first large-scale public art piece. And I worked with 2 of their apprentices to collect feedback from the community of Avondale here in Cincinnati. The prompt was write 2 to 5 words to positively motivate the people of Avondale or inspire the people of Avondale. So we had another like Cincinnati's Table style dinner event where people were fed and invited to think about this and draw/write responses on these cards. And then we also made these little ballot boxes that went up at the laundromat and the library and Family Dollar. They went around town. The rec center took one. And we collected a lot of input. From that, all of those responses, we first of all created a zine so that everyone was involved. And then we selected 4 that turned into these large scale public sculptures for this walking trail in Avondale. And so, yeah, I worked with a fabrication team, like local artist Rick Woolhoy did the metal work, and then a company in Vegas made the lights. But these lights were done in the font, in the handwriting of the participants who submitted. And they're solar powered, so they light up at night, and I'm really excited about it. I want to do it in other places. So that's most of what I've got. I'm just going to end with a few images from this daily drawing project that I'm still doing. I started my current daily drawing project started January 1st, 2020, and really has become a point of meditation for me through this COVID pandemic. And I post them a week at a time on my Instagram, just as a way for me to process everything and reflect. So I think that's it.
All right. So I'm gonna pop back on here and add a spotlight so we can see each other. All right. We have a great question from Sarah Vance Waddell. Since you live and work in the same place, how do you separate work from personal and family? Or do you?
I don't. Should I stop sharing my screen and then I'll get into that question more? I don't know. Sure. I will. Okay. It helps me see everyone better. Yeah, I don't. And I've given up trying. For a while, like when I was in San Francisco, I tried to achieve this work-life balance. And now I don't know. I've taken the philosophy that that this is my life, that work is my life and life is my work, and it's okay that that they're not separated, and that my daughter has to be at every art opening, and that, you know, like it just is what it is. And I figure it actually has reduced my stress a lot to just accept that, and that it's just is what it is. So I don't know.
That's great. So folks, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the comments and we'll be sure to get to them. I love that you ended on what you're excited for and that it almost feels like a projection that your most recent project is a light.
Yeah.
There are these really lovely weavings of experience and kind of reflection of experience and turning things on its ear so that folks can hear deeply, listen deeply. Like you are engaging the viewer in the act that you do. It's how did you come to that practice, or did you recognize that you're doing that?
I think it's a little bit of both. So I come from a museum education background, and in museum education, at least in the museums I've worked in, we're very entrenched in the philosophy of Paulo Freire, who speaks about like students come with a glass half full, and the student is the teacher and the teacher is the student. It's a trade. It's not a there's no like sage on the stage, right? Like it's like we're going to teach each other and everyone has something to share. And so I think that it has a lot. I think my art practice and my practice as my job as an administrator has a lot to do with that. It has to do with recognizing that every person that enters Wave Pool or enters one of the art projects or is involved in the community in any way has just as much to offer as I have to offer them. And I think it has to do with this mutual respect. So yeah, I think that and then it's taken me a long time to realize that that listening can be the art project, that act, that social engagement is the project in and of itself. And I don't need to have this finished sculpture. It's nice when it does happen, like in the last project, but I don't need to have that in order for it to be the practice, to be the work. So Lucy Lepard, she speaks a lot about social practice as social collage, right? Like this act of taking pieces of people's stories and talents and spaces and resources and connecting them all together to make something bigger than the sum of its parts. And I think a lot about that idea of social collage and like how the act of a social practice artist really is a collage process of making connections in a social way.
It's beautiful. Someone would like to know if the Avondale project is still up.
Yeah, it's permanent. Yep, it's at the Hirsch Recreation Center. I recommend going at dusk because then you get to see them turn on when it gets dark enough.
That's great. I had a question and it was right there. Oh no. That's what it was. So recognizing like the impact of arts on community, you really tie into the theme of the exhibition, Build It, Artists Creating Community in Ohio. Like everyone that's exhibiting in the show really does, to be honest. But I feel like you live it on a molecular level. And I'm curious, in the many years that you have had Wave Pool established, have you recognized what that intentional deep listening has done for the community, and what effects have you seen blossom from that were maybe expected, maybe unexpected, that you think are really important for people to understand?
Yeah, I would say as an art center, when you go into a community, open up a new art space, it's very easy, and I think even expected to be seen, and maybe actually even to be this like gentrifying force that's going to change the community, maybe for the better for some folks, but maybe not for a lot of folks. And I think that the listening practice has created a sense of trust between us and the residents. Of course, we are the residents, so that's another thing, is like to actually be the audience that you wish to serve is usually a good starting point. But it's created this sense of trust and camaraderie that we are building this together. When we first started getting feedback, for example, that Camp Washington is a food desert and food access is the biggest need, we were able to come up with a quick solution. We made this like teardrop trailer called Camp Washington Art and Mobile Produce, with a tandem bicycle, and delivered produce around the neighborhood twice a week during the summer, along with art projects. We'd like pop up in parks or at the pool. And so that was like a direct response to the deep listening, and people could see that. They could be like, oh yeah, I wrote on the card in the hardware store that we need more food access and fresh produce. And then here it is, like a year later or 6 months later. Long term, it took a lot longer to figure out, and we're still figuring it out by getting some major funding to open the Welcome Project Market. But I think that the residents like see us not only listening, but also responding to the needs. And that's just, it's created a really welcoming and like comfortable place for people to come and be part of.
That's wonderful. We have 3 more minutes. So we have one comment from Amy, said, thank you so much. You covered nearly every question I had for you. I just wanted to say I'm inspired, and I wonder what you're cooking up next at Wave Pool and in Camp Washington.
There's always a lot going on at Wave Pool and in Camp Washington. So I don't know how much I can talk about everything happening in 3 minutes, but I encourage you to follow the website and social media. Yeah, there's a lot of good projects in the works. So
Hey, I think we have a really good question to end on. I imagine along the way, people thought you were crazy and taking some big risks. Can you talk about how your practice as an artist took priority, and how you've been able to then become a sustainable and necessary part of the community?
Yeah, people still think I'm crazy and taking big risks. So, you know, I will like preface this by saying that like Wave Pool and my own art practice, like they took a lot of personal donations, both of time, you know, like I worked for Wave Pool full time for free for the first 3 years, and monetary investment as well. But coming from the Bay Area, where I was working essentially 2 full-time jobs, and then I was pregnant, there was just no way, like wrapping my head around how I was going to maintain these 2 full-time jobs, which I could not bear to part with either, and being a mom. I just didn't see any other option for keeping these lives segregated. I had to find a solution for combining everything. Because otherwise I had to like invent my own job in order to maintain all of the pieces of life that I loved. So I don't know if that answers the question at all, but that's okay, good.
Yeah, it's the very root of artists, the problem solving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you so much, Cal, for this wonderful talk. Thank you to everyone who joined. I hope you're just as inspired as I am. Thank you to the governor's office and the Ohio legislature who supports the Ohio Arts Council, which allows for the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery to exist and amplify voices like Cal Cullen's. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.